162, Adventure of a Lifetime. I'm really excited to share a little bit of this. I hope that it's encouraging and exciting for you guys. Of course, we have a quote at the top of 162. It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. Does anyone know the... What is so funny?
That's Star Wars quote?
Huh?
That's Star Wars quote? Oh my God.
What?
Fellowship of the Ring.
Does anyone know the context of what's going on in this quote? First of all, by a show of hands, and I promise you won't be judged, has anyone not seen or read Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring?
Wow. Oh.
There is actually a lot of judgment. We need to fix this, guys. What is going on? No, that's okay. That's okay. Does anyone who knows, where does this come from? What's the context of this quote? Anybody know? Go for it.
They already said it. It's Bilbo talking to Frodo. I know it's Samwise.
Ooh, it's close. It's when Sam is getting ready. He hits the point where he's been the furthest from the Shire. And he says, one more step, and this will be the furthest I've ever gone from home. And it's Bilbo tells Frodo, and Frodo's telling Sam this quote. We'll come back to this. I think this is actually...
I just want to share with you.
What?
Can I just tell you that as soon as I read this, I looked at Esther and was like, this is from The Wizard of Oz. Because
That is Toto. Toto. It was Toto. Similar themes. All right. We will get back to this. I promise this quote will be relevant. I think it's even something, by the time we're done tonight, I think it's one that you guys will want to write and put on your doors, back on your campuses, and remember. Even if you think, no way. I think you will. Okay. So we're going to look at kind of two things with this adventure of a lifetime. How is sharing our faith considered to be an adventure of a lifetime? We'll look at two areas. The first being that we are called to something bigger than ourselves, than yourself. And the second is the adventure of the global impact that sharing our faith could have, and I believe will have. And I think examples like tonight is already it moving forward. And so, you are called to something bigger than yourself. Point number one, God does not need us, but He wants us. God does not need us, but He wants us. If I could have one person flip to Isaiah 40:28, and one person flip to Acts 17:25, and first person to get to the Isaiah verse, if they could read that out loud, please.
Have you not known, have you not heard? The Lord is everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable.
Thank you. Thank you much. So I think with that, when I read that, I think, man, that makes me feel pretty small and God pretty big. And I think one example is when we go and share, it's important to understand that God is not in heaven on His throne thinking, man, if Dylan doesn't do a good job tonight, I don't know how this commission's going to be fulfilled. Or if Dayton doesn't do a good job tonight, I really need him to bring his A game. Because there's a guy, and if he butchers it, we're done. No. God does not grow weary. He is in control. He is sovereign, and He doesn't need us, but He wants us. If someone could read Acts 17:25.
Nor is He served by human hands, as though He needed anything, since He Himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything.
Right. There is nothing that God needs, certainly nothing that we can do to add to God, to add to His sovereignty, to add to His glory. But here is the, and I think Cam, with word training, so helpful to read and just get a general scope of the Bible. But, the Bible is not, it's not about us. And it's not some self-help book to help us live a better life. That the Bible ultimately is pointing us to Jesus and pointing us to God and showing us His glory. And ultimately the Bible is showing that, man, by ourselves and on our own, we can't earn our way to heaven, right? The Bible is not about you. It's not about me. It's about pointing us to a greater glory. And I even think, when reading, I always thought, why when man first fell, did God not just scrap the whole plan then? Like, when man first fell, why wasn't it, at that point, Adam and Eve, why not just be like, okay, erase that, or destroy them, and so that they can't continue to create and be in sin? Why did he? And that's a pretty deep theological question, but I do think that in the Bible, on several points, I think would reference this, is because when God saw that, in that moment, He saw you as well. And He saw me, and He saw people that, man, He really loves and cherishes. The gospel is that you are more sinful than you could ever imagine, but that God, through Christ, loves you more than you could ever hope. And so, remembering that God doesn't need us, but He wants us. That God delights in you. That God delights in those who are His son and His daughter. And I believe that that's why, ultimately, He redeemed His people and is currently redeeming His people. It's because God truly does love His creation. He loves you. And so I think really meditate on that and think about that, is that He doesn't need you, but He wants you. And if that's true, then point 2 is you are part of God's plan to redeem His people. You are part of God's plan to redeem His people. There are a couple instances in the Bible where He just kind of reveals Himself in miraculous ways. I think of the burning bush as one of them. But most of the time through Scripture, that God is using people to reach who He wants to reach. That God is using people while sinful and broken. He is using them and in order to gather His people and ultimately to glorify Him. If someone could read Acts 17, 26 and 27, so just literally the next 2 verses from where we just were.
And He made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way towards Him and find Him. Yet He is actually not far from each one of us.
Thank you. This is a pretty profound truth in God's Word. That of one blood He made all the nations of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined the times that you should live and the places that you should live. So it's not by coincidence or chance or luck or karma or whatever that you are where you are on the campuses that you're at, whether here in Denver, learning and growing in your faith, but that, man, that God is really behind this. And even more so, it's not by chance that we run into people like the people that we ran into tonight and are sharing our faith with them, that, man, God is even orchestrating that. And so you are part of such a bigger plan when God changes you, because now He's using you to continue to reach others. As we saw last week, that we're called and commissioned to go and to all the nations. And so extremely powerful to think that it's not just chance that you are where you are, that, man, it really is for a purpose, and that God, that you would seek God, but then not only that, but that we could reach other people as well. And so if this is true, I want to spend a little bit of time, especially with missional training this year, to have a little bit perspective on the nation. So what does this mean? Here we are in Denver, and we go to the schools that we go to in Illinois and Missouri and Ohio, and so what is global impact, and why is that significant, and why should we think about that? Why should we have a missional mindset of not just where we're at, but the nations and the world? And so I want to throw a couple kind of facts, numbers at your guys' way here of why global impact is important. I will say that these numbers first are, if you go to the Joshua Project, that's a really, really good resource that I encourage you guys on your phones or computers to look at, to just see whether it's areas where Christians are persecuted or areas of unreached people groups that you can pray for and just kind of educate yourselves on certain areas of the world where, man, there is no gospel presence. And so that's where these numbers are from, and I encourage you guys to kind of look that up throughout the summer and be praying for that in your rooms. And so how many unreached people groups are there? Before you throw it up, Colton. An unreached people group, I think to define, would be just a group of people who share a similar culture or language or are in a community together who do not have the gospel, who have not been reached with the gospel. There is no gospel presence in their people group. And so, go ahead. Unreached people groups. Right now, there are an estimated 6,659 unreached groups of people in the world. The total population of these unreached people is 3.06 billion. 3.06 billion people right now who not only do not believe, but have not heard the gospel. For a percentage of 42%. 42% of our world is unreached. What's even more shocking is kind of the geographical location of where these are. And so this next was called the 1040 window. So in the 1040 window, I'll have a map here that will show you what the 1040 window is. But an estimated 2.97 billion individuals who live in approximately 5,572 unreached people groups are in this window. If you want to hit the next slide. And that is where that is. This is the 1040 window. So when we say that, man, we want to be missional mindset and we want to reach those who do not have the gospel, this is where we want to go. This is our hope. A lot of people there. A lot of people in those areas. I think some of us know maybe geographically where some of these are, but it's pretty amazing, right? I mean, it's pretty amazing that 2.97 billion of the 3.06 billion who are unreached are in this area. It's my prayer that maybe one of us one day will be able to go to these areas and share the gospel. Maybe not one of us, but maybe somebody that we lead to Christ and disciple. Maybe it's some of the people we met in China today. That God can change their heart, put a new song in their heart, and they go back home and tell Jesus to their friends and their family who may have never heard. This doesn't mean, I feel like this map can be not misleading, but there are, in especially areas of India and in China, and there are areas, ministries. I mean, Campus Outreach, for instance, has a ministry in China, so it's not that of all the people in China, nobody's a Christian. But it's more illustrating that in these points and in this area, there are unreached people. There are unreached people. So it's not that the whole area may be like India, but there are a lot of people who do not know the gospel. In this window. And so, one reason why is honestly just other truths that people are clinging to or believe that have an effect on how they live their life. But one thing I want to focus on is the apostasy of Islam. If you can go to the next slide. And so let's define apostasy. What does this mean? It is the abandonment, the renunciation of religious belief or political belief. This is a little bit foreign to us, maybe, that this exists. And if it is a little foreign to you, that things like this, that apostasy, which is illegal in some countries, when you think, wow, what? Then this next thing will really kind of rock you. Go ahead to the next slide. In these following countries, the renunciation of Islam is criminal. It's criminal. You can go to prison. People who share the gospel missionaries can also receive the same punishment in these following countries: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Libya, Algeria, and Morocco. And the next set of countries, including Egypt and Iraq, apostasy is you can go to prison, you can lose custody of a child, or your marriage can be void. Your marriage can be void. And in the following set that includes areas of Saudi Arabia, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Sudan, it's actually death. You can die for renunciation of Islam in these countries. And so I share that to say a lot of these countries are in that window. A lot of those countries are in these people groups. They make up the population of people that don't know Jesus. And that there's extreme risk in not only sharing but also believing. And so what I don't want you to hear me say is that, well, then people who are Muslim are evil and looking to either throw you in prison or kill you. That's not true. But in these countries where there's strong political and spiritual guidelines and boundaries, there are repercussions. There are repercussions in the world. If nothing else, we need to be going to the God who is over these countries and really praying. And that's a huge step. If we could become on this project a group of 45 people that every night before we go to bed are just taking 90 seconds to pray for one of these countries, God can move. God can work. God may send you. And that'd be awesome. That'd be great to proclaim the gospel or have an effect. Or that God is bringing people from these countries maybe to go to your school next year. Maybe coming in as freshmen or sophomores. Going back to be able to share with their friends and family. But this is just an idea of the effect that we can have by sharing our faith. And that there is a need to share our faith. That sometimes it's easy to think, well, in America where it seems like there's a church on more churches than Starbucks or McDonald's, there's some that have never heard of this Jesus. This person that has changed our lives. And I was reading a little bit about this. And I'll confess, I haven't read the Quran. And so I'm not going to try to reference it or paraphrase it because I don't want to butcher it and say something that isn't true. But I was reading this interview that they had with a Muslim who is an expert in the Quran, and they were asking him, what is the thesis of your spiritual book? What is the thesis of the Quran? And he said it was to become a better person. To become a better person. That you may learn and grow morally and be more acceptable to Allah. That should really kind of rock you, I think. Because the thesis of the Bible, there's several. We've already mentioned Romans 6:23, which is powerful. I think of verses, I am the light, the way, and the truth. No one gets to the Father except through me. It's Jesus speaking. It is far more than be a good person. Because the Bible is not about you. The Bible isn't about cleaning up your life. The Bible isn't about just going to church and coming on projects and doing Bible studies. It is that, man, we are hopeless without Christ. R.C. Sproul explains it, who's a pastor in Orlando. If you're familiar with Ligonier Ministries, he founded that, which is a great ministry. And he said, many people view Christianity as you are drowning in the water, and Jesus perfectly throws you a floating device or a tube that you can grab a hold of, and then he'll reel you in and save your life. And he said that is not a correct view of Christianity. He would say, you are at the bottom of the ocean dead, and he came down and grabbed you and breathed new life in you. that you weren't drowning, you didn't need help, you weren't this close, that you were dead. Dead. And had God not saved you, there's nothing you could do. And so what a good God, right? What a good God, and what a great promise to cling to. That, man, we all were once dead, and that God in His grace that He has extended us has breathed new life in us so that we are not just complacent and passive, but when we read and see things like you could be put to death in Afghanistan for sharing your faith, or for leaving if a Muslim were to convert to Christianity, they could be killed. We would think, man, it really would be worth it, because they need the gospel. Because it's not about just trying to be better. And so, one effective, as we move into practice, what we're going to do today is the testimony workshop. And this is the first kind of thing that we're going to learn in missional training of a way that we can share our faith. I will say, in this final blank, is your testimony is not boring. Your testimony is not boring. Your story is not boring. And I say this because this is a really, really helpful exercise to be able to articulate your testimony with somebody as you're sharing your faith, of the story of how you came to Christ, or the story of how God changed your heart. But with some, it may be kind of easy to think like, I came from somewhat of a Christian background, or maybe you don't have just this past of just craziness when people say, they're just like, oh my gosh, wow, that is amazing. And so sometimes you could think, it's just a normal, I went to college and met a guy and share my faith, and I wasn't a terrible person. I came to Christ. And there's your testimony, and once we effectively learn how to share it, has real power to people that we're sharing with. Because as we just looked at, there's nothing boring about being brought back from the dead. And that is what we all were. There's nothing boring about that. And so this is a helpful exercise, but I don't want you guys to think, I want you to come in sober in a way of like, wow, God in His grace, something really supernatural did happen in changing your heart. And so you're on page 212 will be a little helpful article that we'll all read. And here in a minute, when we break into your D groups, you'll start by just reading this, sharing your life story. And then just behind, you don't have to flip back, but if you just go an extra page, you'll see the testimony workshop, and it's a blank page. And what we're going to do tonight, is after kind of reading this, we're going to kind of write out our testimony. And so really there's kind of three big parts we want to make sure and understand and hit on, and this article talks about it. But basically, my life before Christ, and then a moment of conversion, or when you feel like God changed your heart and Jesus became your Lord and Savior, and then life after. And so those are just to kind of help, even if you want to write on that blank sheet, just kind of those three areas to focus on. What did my life look like before Christ? Then point of conversion, and then now. How is it different, or how is God growing me? And this article is extremely helpful for that. Also, there's some things that maybe you haven't really, some of you are coming in and thinking, man, I don't know what my testimony is, or I don't know if I have a clear point of conversion or things like that. And that's really okay. And this is a great place to figure that out. And so as servant leaders will be here to help you, and team leaders, and even us staff, please come to me, come to Dayton, come to Julie. Any of us, and if you have questions or concerns or things that you want to talk through, or just, hey, just share your testimony with, we would love to help you, kind of help process through some of those things for you guys, so you can articulate it clearly, or as clear as you can when you go out and share your faith in the future. And even to yourself, I think, too, is a huge thing, right? That when we're sharing the gospel, we're not just sharing with other people, but we're also sharing with ourselves, that when we're hearing some of those gospel truths and remembering our testimony, it's good for us as well. And so before you guys break up into your D groups, I'll go first and share my testimony, so you guys have a little bit of an idea. Maybe it's helpful. And so I grew up. My parents were both believers, and so at a young age, I heard the gospel. We would do household Bible studies and read sometimes passages in Scripture before bed and things like that. But I have two older brothers. Sorry. One is 4 and the other one is 8 years older than me. And growing up, they especially when my oldest brother, when he was getting into about college, senior year of high school, college and freshman, he just started to see that, man, this really wasn't for him. He wasn't a Christian. He didn't really believe the Bible. And so what that did is that trickled down. It trickled down to my brother 4 years older than me, and then it trickled down to me. So at a much younger age than kind of my two older brothers, I was kind of like, I don't think I'm a Christian either, because I want to follow my brothers. And my parents are just old, and they don't really know what they're talking about. And so going into high school even, I was an atheist. I couldn't probably even spell atheist. But that's what I would have identified with. And just as a high school freshman through senior year, just kind of everything was built on my reputation. Everything was built on just what people thought about me. I was pretty athletic, but the only sport I played was golf. So I don't know how athletic I was. So I developed a good sense of humor so I could hang out with the guys. No, maybe that's true. I don't know. But I wanted to have as many friends, as many different social pockets as I could. And so I wasn't super smart, but I was friends with the smart people. I wasn't super athletic, but I was friends with the athletes. Just things like that. I was kind of a chameleon. I just wanted to be liked by everyone. And started to quickly just, everything was determined what other people thought of me and success I could have and things I could achieve. And then I graduated, and I started to see, once I graduated, there was something a little off. I don't think I could have defined it at the time, but I wanted to go to a school that nobody else in my graduating class, and I graduated with probably 300 students, went to. And so I just wanted to almost have a restart. I just wanted to kind of get away and be able to kind of meet new people, and didn't really want to hang out with the same crew. I mean, if Twitter and Instagram was around back then, I probably would have or something. I don't know. But I just wanted to go do my own thing. And so I go to IUPUI, which for those who don't know is similar to a Harvard. Very prestigious. It's the best of IU and Purdue in the greatest city of the world, Indianapolis. So it's very top notch. I went there. I requested. I was like, I want to meet new people. I want to be friends, but I don't know if I did. But I put on my thing, I wanted it had preferences on roommate situations. So my first preference was I would like 2 roommates. I think it'd be cool, 3 of us. What's up? Yeah. The second one was 4. It would be me and 3 other people, and I'm like, all right. The third one, I'm like, okay, 2. And the fourth one, I'm like, I'd just be a single. I get to the dorm at IUPUI, and they just put me by myself. And so I don't know what kind of personality test I failed, but they're like, this dude's a psycho. And my parents didn't really give me a lot of things, so I had a dresser, and people called my room Juvie Hall because I didn't go to Bed Bath & Beyond like Tim did, and get all the lights and stuff. It was just a bed. It was kind of like a prison. So that my freshman year, it's just kind of already I was sort of oh gosh, I'm by myself. I don't really know what to do. I don't know anybody. And so I started just to go to open gyms, which is just play basketball. I love playing basketball, and so I just go and play basketball all the time. And I met a dude named Chris Coons, who is a sophomore, a year older than me, and seemed really nice and wanted to hang out and always wanted to play basketball, and we kind of bonded over that. And he started to kind of invite me to weekly meetings that we had at IUPUI. It was called TNL, Tuesday Night Live or something like that, where it was just kind of a primarily evangelistic meeting to go and hear the gospel. And I was like, no, I'm good. I kept kind of pushing him off. He was like, Bible study. I'm like, no, I got to study. I I didn't have to study. I was like undecided. I was like taking like art. For art majors, you're fine, but it's not a real major. I'm kidding. And then eventually I finally got to the point where I was just like, all right, I'll go to your Bible study that he was having in this freshman dorm just to say, like, just to be polite and say, hey man, I tried it and I'm not interested. And I went, and the Bible study was, they were just starting. It was a Who is Jesus Bible study. And so it was just going through just different passages of this person of Jesus. And I started to quickly see that their snacks were really good. And so I would go back for that. And then what I thought of Christianity, even growing up and hearing it from my parents, there was just a disconnect from then now what I was actually reading and studying. And I saw that God is very big, and that my sin is a very big deal to God, and that I am very small. And so I think those three things just kind of like rocked me a little bit. And so I kept going to this study and kept meeting with Chris, and he just started to share with me more about who Jesus is. And I started just to hit a point where I felt like, man, I feel like I really do want to believe in this, but there's just a couple things I'm still holding on to that I'm not really ready to let go. One of them was a relationship with my girlfriend who was still in high school, which we all know how well that works. My mom, actually, I loved art. I studied art history. That was my major for like a day. And but I made this really cool thing. And I was like, what am I going to do? I gave it to my girlfriend when I was still a senior in high school. And my mom was so mad because it was like it was like a lion, it was really cool. And she goes, oh, honey. She goes, this is never going to last. And you just lost a piece of artwork that I loved. And I was like, but you don't know my life. It's going to last. It didn't last. So that was kind of the thing that I felt like I needed to let go of my freshman year, and I did. And honestly, this might sound bad, but it felt like a burden lifted off my shoulders. And after that, I was able to just say, man, that if this is true, then you need to be all in. I need to be all in. I can't just toe the line that I either need to reject it or believe it, but I can't just take it and just think, well, that's neat, and I'll just keep going what I was doing. So about end of November of my freshman year, God changed my heart. And then through college, Chris started to disciple me. I came to a couple projects similar to this, just looking to grow in my faith. And then I graduated with a sociology major, which means you'll be working at McDonald's if you don't go on staff. And so I was like, hey, Patrick, can I go on staff? No, he asked me, and I started to work at Ohio State, and now I'm here. But yeah, that's kind of my testimony, my story of how God changed my heart, and He's continuing by His grace to grow me more and more into the image of Christ each and every day. And even sitting on things like this, it's probably my 5th or 6th project, and there's still things I hear where I'm just like, man, that's awesome, and truths that you need to cling to and promises you need to cling to from all the different people, and meeting you guys. And so, it's kind of my testimony. And so what I'll say with that is that's long, and you don't probably, in the context, have time to share that. But since I know that so well, what I can do is when I'm meeting people on 16th Street, when there's people with areas of their life that I can quickly identify with, like, man, I don't know, I'm just trying to have a good time, or I'm just trying to have fun. I can be like, man, I identify so much in that, because that's how I was living my life for so long. I just wanted the approval of man until God changed my heart. And so you can kind of speed it up, and you can take certain parts of your testimony, you'll soon find out, to just apply and put little snippets of it in situations, conversations back on campus or on 16th Street or things like that. So that's why we're doing this workshop, and it's really helpful.